A father and son are killed in a double shooting in Cambridgeshire. The attacks happened in villages 6 miles apart. 2 men and a woman have been arrested. The police say the public is not at risk.
Quite a close community, everyone's friendly. So very, very surprised, very shocked.
It's sort of not the sort of place you expect anything like this to happen.
The killing of Chris Cabba. The case is referred to the CPS after the unarmed black man was shot by police. Pouring life savings into going private. The patients giving up on the NHS. A royal first as King Charles addresses the German Parliament. And Beatlemania from Paul's perspective. His newly released photos are out.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hossain.
Good afternoon. Police in Cambridgeshire say a father and son were killed in 2 separate shootings last night. The attacks happened just after 9 o'clock in villages 6 miles apart. The force says the men were targeted. 3 arrests have since been made, and police say the public is not at risk. One line of inquiry is that the attacks were related to a custody battle over a child. Charlie Frost has the latest.
Police say these attacks in these 2 rural villages were targeted and there's no threat to the public. But that doesn't mean it's left neighbours any less shaken.
Very shocking. We don't have things like that usually go on in this village.
When you hear the word murder, that's pretty horrendous, especially when you're a dog walker. You know, you feel quite vulnerable out there sometimes as it is.
Quite a close community, everyone's friendly. So very, very surprised, very shocked.
It's surreal, actually. It's sort of not the sort of place you expect anything like this to happen. And, you know, been a bit stunned.
This is a usually quiet close in the village of Bluntisham. Families live here. There's scooters and trampolines outside homes. But at around 9 o'clock last night, police were called after reports of gunshots.
Inside one of the homes, officers found the body of a 32-year-old man. Then, less than 40 minutes later, detectives got a call from someone in Sutton, another village just over 6 miles away. In a property here, the body of a 57-year-old man was found. He also had gunshot wounds. Both of their deaths are being treated as murder.
What became quite apparent is that the victims in both these cases were related, and we are working on the basis that those 2 individuals are father and son. Having identified that, it became quite apparent this was a very targeted and isolated attack, but it also gave us an opportunity to identify a potential motive. Having identified what that was, it allowed officers to move very, very quickly and make arrests.
Detectives have arrested 3 people, a 27-year-old man and a 33-year-old woman in Cambridge, as well as a 66-year-old man in Worcestershire. All 3 arrested on suspicion of conspiracy to murder. Charlie Frost, ITV News in Cambridgeshire.
Our correspondent Ben Chapman is at the police headquarters in Huntington in Cambridgeshire. You've just spoken to police officers there. What's the latest on the investigation?
Yes, I've been speaking to the Chief Superintendent who's leading this inquiry. He was able to tell me not just that the 2 victims last night were father and son, but that those arrested last night knew them, that they were able to establish a motive really quite quickly, and that that motive concerns a dispute that has been taking place within one family network. And he said one line of inquiry is that a custody battle over a child may have been the motive for what happened last night. Now, he was also able to tell me that close family members of those who were shot last night are absolutely distraught and devastated. Some of them witnessed the aftermath of the shootings. In terms of reassurance for the local community, the fact that he says that this is contained within one family network, he says that should be reassuring to people, that there is no wider threat to the public. They're not looking for anybody else in connection with these murders. The focus of their investigation now is to work out what changed. What was the catalyst for the violence last night? What turned a dispute within a family into 2 fatal shootings in rural Cambridgeshire?
Ben Chapman, thank you very much. Thank you. The new plan to power up Britain was unveiled today. That's the government's latest promise to be greener, less reliant on foreign energy and cut bills. But Labour says it was just a rehash of old policies with old money, while environmental campaigners said they could take legal action again if these plans still don't go far enough. Our political reporter Amy Lewis has the details.
Oh, so you get the resistance.
It is the Prime Minister's plan to get a grip on the UK's reliance on fossil fuels and reducing energy bills along the way. Rishi Sunak is in Oxfordshire to witness research into nuclear fusion, which he says is the future.
What we need is actually a long-term plan to ensure our energy security and get our bills down and make sure this never happens again. That's why I created a brand new Department for Energy Security. Today we're announcing more investment in renewables like offshore wind, reviving the nuclear industry, developing new industries like carbon capture and storage.
The government says it has paid about half of household energy bills this winter, which have soared since Russia's invasion of Ukraine. As part of its plan to cut energy costs, it's promised to speed up planning approvals for solar and offshore wind. It's also announced 3 sites in Teesside in the northeast for storing captured carbon that's created during the burning of fossil fuels. And a scheme offering households £5,000 to replace their gas boilers with heat pumps has been extended by 3 years to 2028. The report has been drawn up after the High Court ruled the government's existing plans to be net zero by 2050 were not sufficient to meet the target. Climate campaigners who brought the legal case against the last plan said they might have to go back to court.
There do seem to be some very serious issues with some of the policies that are being proposed and some of the other policies that aren't being proposed. So, for example, there really is not enough there on insulation.
Today's announcements don't come with any new funding, and Labour claim it's a rehash of previous government commitments.
We were expecting a green energy revolution. I think this is anything but that. Particular sadness that they've once again ignored the removal of the moratorium on onshore wind, which is, has great potential for energy generation. So, no, it's with sadness, really, because we think this is a huge missed opportunity.
For customers, the concern isn't just about lowering emissions, but also cutting energy bills.
I'd be happy to get cleaner energy, but not pay more on my bills.
Right. The point of cleaner energy is that it should be kind of cheaper and more efficient and more affordable.
The government say they want the UK to have the cheapest electricity in Europe by 2035, but admit today's announcements are unlikely to bring down household bills in the months to come. Amy Lewis, ITV News, Westminster.
Next, a significant development in the case of an unarmed young black man who was shot dead by a Metropolitan Police officer. Chris Cabba was shot in London last September. This morning, the police watchdog announced it has referred the case to the Crown Prosecution Service. Mr Cabba's family has welcomed the move and urged the CPS to prosecute the officer who is currently suspended. Our correspondent John Ray is here. First of all, tell us more about Chris Cabba's killing.
Well, as you say, Nina, Chris Cabba, who was an aspiring musician, was shot dead by police in Streatham in South London in September last year. He was unarmed and, crucially too, he was not a suspect. However, the car he was driving that night had been linked by police to a firearms offence the previous day. So the police stopped that car and Chris's life was ended by a single shot through the windscreen, fired by a police officer identified publicly only by his operational number, which is NX121. As you say, he is suspended from duty. Today, after 8 months, we heard the results of the investigation by the Independent Office for Police Conduct. This is what they said.
During the investigation, the officer was advised that they were under criminal investigation for murder, and following the conclusion of our investigation, we have referred a file of evidence to the Crown Prosecution Service to determine whether to charge the officer. A referral to the Crown Prosecution Service does not necessarily mean criminal charges will follow.
So, John, what happens next?
Well, you will recall that that shooting was followed by a great deal of public unease and some public protest. Chris's family have campaigned for truth and for justice. This lunchtime, they've told us that this step forward is necessary and welcome. We very much hope that the CPS advise in favour of a prosecution and that the truth will emerge without delay through criminal proceedings. Now, of course, people will be tempted to see all this through the prism of last week's Casey report, which found that the Metropolitan Police was, amongst other things, guilty of institutional racism. It is important, though, to point out that the CPS will reach its decision on a prosecution on the basis of the file and the file only.
John Rowe, thank you very much. Thank you. To the United States now, where several people are feared dead after 2 military helicopters crashed in Kentucky. It happened during a routine training exercise last night in the Trigg County area of the state. The Kentucky governor said fatalities are expected. The status of the crew members is unclear at this stage. And the Pope's health is progressively improving, the Vatican said today, after he was taken to hospital yesterday with a respiratory infection. The 86-year-old had one lung removed as a young man. The Vatican said he's been reading the newspapers and working from hospital in Rome. King Charles has made some European history by becoming the first British monarch to address the German Parliament. He used the platform to praise the two countries both supporting Ukraine and tackling the climate change emergency. But he couldn't resist a football quip too, reminding his audience how England beat their old rivals in the Euros last summer. Carrie Davis reports.
The day began like any other state visit, a welcome from a foreign dignitary. In this case, Germany's Chancellor Olaf Scholz greeted King Charles outside the Bundestag building. Inside, something far from usual took place. For the first time ever, a British monarch addressed the German Parliament.
Dass ich hier sprechen darf.
And it is a particular honour to be here with you, where I wish to renew the pledge of friendship between our nations.
Switching between English and German, King Charles praised relations between the two nations.
I can hardly begin to express the pride I feel in the strength of the partnership between our two countries.
Earlier, something much more familiar. The royal couple were the most popular offering at this Berlin food market. Like the sweetness of honey, this trip is designed to remedy the bitterness left by Brexit. His historic speech got a warm reception. On culture, he got a few laughs.
More recent generations may think as readily of the Beatles or Kraftwerk.
And with a long-standing football rivalry, he couldn't resist mentioning this.
It was particularly special that the England women's football team, the Lionesses, were able to win the Euros against Germany.
There were serious notes. He spoke of the joint efforts to tackle climate change and offer help to Ukraine.
Germany's decision to send such significant military support to Ukraine is remarkably courageous, important and appreciated.
A speech in the heart of German democracy, proving once again he won't shy away from political topics. Carrie Davis, ITV News.
Let's go live to Berlin now and join our royal editor Chris Shipp. An historic moment for King Charles today. What can we expect later?
Well, more visits from the King and from the Queen Consort as well. But this small street in a cosmopolitan part of South Berlin is just getting back to normal, because about where I'm standing now, a few moments ago, the State Bentley was here carrying the Queen Consort to this refugee centre, which helps both those refugees from Syria as well as Ukraine. And the car's kind of part of the mystique of this royal visit, this big state visit here in Germany. In fact, when we were at the Chancellery earlier, it was almost getting as many photos photographs as the King himself, but is all helping for this state visit to go down very well here in Germany. Berlin today, there's Hamburg tomorrow. But what's been going down particularly well, I think, is the King's address, both to the Bundestag today and at a state banquet last night. A lot of his speeches were in German, and that has been appreciated by a lot of those in his audience. I felt the warmth of the room in the Bundestag today. And he touched on all those areas where Britain and Germany's relationship is now so much better. We're not talking about the distant past at the moment. We will do that in Hamburg tomorrow when they will remember those killed in the Second World War. But I'm talking more about this more recent turbulence that Britain and Europe have had caused by Brexit. And this visit is helping to smooth a lot of those tensions and also help to focus on things like trade, which of course is one of the government's priorities.
Chris Shipp, thank you very much. Thank you. Here, leading cancer doctors say there's a crisis in care that could cost tens of thousands of lives. A group of oncologists and cancer experts have written to the NHS England board pleading for an urgent meeting. The call comes as more and more people are going private for cancer care and other treatments because of the long NHS waiting lists. Our health editor, Emily Morgan, is with me. How are waiting list times faring on the NHS for cancer care specifically?
Well, they're not great, and it's one of the reasons that these oncologists are speaking out. They say they have an overwhelming moral obligation to lay out their concerns. And their main concern really is that 1 in 2 cancer patients are facing delays in treatment. 46% are not being seen, diagnosed and then start their treatment within 62 days. Now, that's a government target, but it hasn't been met for 7 years. And I interviewed Professor Pat Price. She's one of the oncologists who's put her name to this letter. I interviewed her for the Tonight programme, and she gave this really stark warning.
That target is there for a reason. International data shows that for every 4-week delay in diagnosis and treatment, there can be on average a 10% increase in death rate.
Given the delays, we're going to see a large rise in the number of people dying.
Absolutely. Tens of thousands of people are going to die.
Look, the delays are causing some cancer patients to go private. They need urgent treatment, and other people as well. What's your investigation found?
Yeah, well, absolutely. We're not just talking about cancer patients. Of course, who have to wait. The longest waits are for things like knee operations and hip replacements. And in the programme, we speak to numerous people who are in so much pain that they simply can't wait anymore. They are going private. And these are ordinary people having to, take out loans or borrow money from family. And we spoke to Candy Duncan, who's from Wales. She couldn't wait 2.5 years for her hip replacement. It was a 4-month wait for private. So she went to Lithuania for care. And this is her speaking before the operation.
I'm financially at my lowest point, I'm physically at my lowest point, I'm emotionally at my lowest point. I don't think I've gone this low. It is a problem to be able to afford it, and I've got to say, the family's fear of me being dependent on them has forced them to empty their pockets, and they're helping me out a great deal here.
Well, Candy's made a full recovery after that operation, and amazingly, the clinic she went to in Lithuania, 70% of patients there are from Britain. I think it says a lot about how the NHS is working at the moment.
70%. Emily Morgan, thank you very much. Thank you. And you can watch Emily's full investigation later today on the Tonight programme, Buy Back Your Health, NHS versus Private. That's at 8:30 on ITV1 and 11:15 on STV and UTV. The prisoner Charles Bronson has lost a bid with the parole board to be freed from jail. The parole board said the panel was not satisfied that he was suitable for release. Bronson has spent most of the past 48 years behind bars for a string of thefts, firearm and violent offences. And plans to increase the state pension age to 68 could be delayed, the Work and Pension Secretary has said. It's expected to rise from 66 to 67 by 2028, but a further rise to 68 might not happen for another 20 years. Finally, in the 60s, the Beatles were the most photographed band in the world, but you can't beat your own snaps. And today we got our first glimpse of Beatlemania from Sir Paul McCartney's point of view. Previously unseen photographs taken by the star have been released before they go on display to the public later this year. Faye Barker has been taking a look.
A time when 4 young men from Liverpool grabbed the attention of the world, the eyes of thousands focused on the dawn of Beatlemania. But now we have a glimpse of how it looked from the other side. Sir Paul McCartney sharing photos he took between the end of 1963 and February 1964, all through the lens of his Pentax camera. Moments with his bandmates, from a smiling John Lennon to Ringo Starr, captured in motion. And George Harrison getting a taste of life as a music idol.
But what about Miami? I mean,
The Fab Four had been touring and returned home as megastars.
Yeah, well, we borrowed these houses. These people rang up and said, "Do you want a house, lad?" So we said, "By gum we do."
They come from a time when the Beatles were really having fun, and their fame was fun to them. Later on, it became an intolerable burden to them, and they hated it. But in 63, 64, they were still amazed by every single day that passed, and all getting on. They're very, very close in those days.
It was a key few months for the Beatles, culminating with their 1964 breakthrough performance on the Ed Sullivan Show in New York. This is just a glimpse of over 250 pictures taken by Sir Paul that until recently he thought were lost. Now 80, he says, "Looking at these photos now, I find there's a sort of innocence about them. Everything was new to us at this point, but I like to think I wouldn't take them any differently today." The public will be able to see these pictures and more at the National Portrait Gallery in London from June. Faye Barker, ITV News.
Mary's here at 6:30 from me. Bye-bye.